What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, New OS Who Dis, and we are back with episode 110 of the video game therapy series. I guess this is another one of those get back on the horse episodes because it's been uh, probably a little over a month since I've last posted, and I guess since then I did clear and wipe my OS and put on a new NVMe drive, so it is because the other one was just filling up too fast, so it was just getting annoying. Um, but yeah, I haven't posted in a while, so figured it's a good day to get back onto that. I won't beat myself up too much, only because there are truly no stakes involved in doing something like this. So, anyway, um, I was thinking about just, this has just been one of those other times in my life where struggling with productivity as one does. Oh, geez. Um, at certain times, and it's not really part of it is the battle against being productive in the first place. I think there's just such a uh, I'll put quote unquote value put on being productive, but I think it's difficult to like one quantify productivity and not just like kind of aimless doing stuff, right? I feel like there's a lot more of that going on than like a lot of things that you could be doing. Like let's say I'm incredibly productive at work or something like that, but if ultimately the work that I'm supposed to be doing is entirely pointless, then is there really what is the purpose of being productive? And I realize that like a big component of it is just being okay with yourself. And if you feel productive, that helps you feel better about yourself. But ultimately, like there's a certain amount of like you have to fool yourself into knowing that like this productivity doesn't really matter. If your job is truly pointless, uh, productivity really is useless. It doesn't really matter how productive you are. You're just doing it so long as I guess to not get fired, really, which to me isn't really shouldn't really be that satisfying. But I suppose if you're able to be satisfied by, uh, I guess just the premise of work being feeling productive enough not to get fired, or that you're really not going to get fired because you're like you can't be fired, or whatever. I don't even know what context really to frame this into where it's appropriate, but ultimately, I think a lot of the productivity that people pursue is towards meaningless ends, given that the actual work that they're doing is pointless, and pointless in more ways than one, or it's just justified in a way that like it's just roundabout justification, or the justification isn't compelling to somebody outside of that sphere, right? Where it's like if you're doing, I don't know, some niche legal uh, counseling or some kind, it'd be easy for me to point out the superfluity of the entire legal system in general. But of course, it's important to you that you feel like the legal system is representative of good or moral judgments, and then you're, on the right side of that battle in some way. So that, like, in that sense, I guess it's okay for you to be pursuing productivity if that is truly what your means are. But for someone like me who isn't, I guess, totally invested into something deeply into something that productivity matters, or I can fool myself into believing that it does matter. Uh, it is more difficult for me to find and quantify true productivity. But one strategy I was kind of pondering on or thinking about a little bit was, and obviously like there's Pomodoro timing and all that stuff, but something that I have has helped me to like not lose track of time is to set a timer for at the top of every hour. And essentially the first 5 minutes of every hour is one to kind of give yourself a built-in break. But two, the 5 minutes are meant to plan the next 55 minutes of that next hour. And I realize that only, allows you to work in 55-minute chunks. But of course you can obviously adjust that if you know, if that makes a difference. But for me, I've noticed that generally, it's easier for me to ignore a timer if I'm in the zone of something versus, if I assume I'm gonna be working for 3 hours on something, I can get sidetracked within 10 minutes, and then all of a sudden I have done nothing for 3 hours. So I feel like it's more useful for me to set it every hour regardless. But it's just an interesting section of it. I know a lot of people do the Pomodoro timers where it's like an hour on, 5 off, or something like that. So it's kind of similar to that, but just setting a timer at the top of your hour is easy, and you can just do it every day. And it kind of, not that it hasn't really worked because I stopped doing it, but it was an attempt, another attempt at some kind of vague productivity goal. But and it's not even about accomplishing anything in particular. It's just about feeling justified that you did something, you made some meaningful use of the time today, or at least it wasn't completely and utterly wasted. Because I feel like there are, and while the lines between that don't really, are pretty blurry anyway. It's not like you can call something totally wasted time. Like if I just, hung out with friends or something, there's nothing on paper that I did that was, quote unquote, at all productive, really. But I'd argue that there's some quantifiable productivity to, healthy social interaction. So that is kind of the past there. But in general, otherwise, it is hard to quantify, like, or at least categorize what is productive and what is unproductive. But I mean, it's more of like it's a feel thing, I can tell when I've been unproductive. So part of it's just like I need to kind of be enough to where I can tell myself I've been productive. Which I realize I don't have a very low barrier for, because again, if it were easy enough for me to just I guess be doing bullshit work and then convince myself of its importance such that I wouldn't lose focus so much, then maybe I would feel productive all the time. But again, it'd take one cynical moment for me to step back and go, oh, maybe this is all worthless. Why the fuck am I doing any of this? And then all of a sudden, there's all that productivity was for naught. Anyway, I kind of hate the whole notion of productivity in general, but I do think it does play a psychological role in feeling like, I guess how you feel about oneself. Self-confidence, I suppose, is a strong tie to how productive you feel in whatever vague sense that means to you. And some people just are, I won't even say gifted, because it's not really a gift to be able to be productive at useless crap, or convince yourself of how productive you were doing useless crap, like anything on a spreadsheet, pretty much. Look how productive I was. It's like, what did you do that was at all, consequential? Probably nothing. Which I guess, you could extend an argument to anything, I guess, because you could make anyone's life, could trivialize anything. It's easy for me to trivialize some other people doing stuff, but there are, I argue that there are some, again, not necessarily any strict boundaries on what is, pointlessly productive and versus what is like existentially unproductive. But there certainly are better or worse things to be doing with your time. Just because, technically everything we do is inconsequential, doesn't matter, doesn't mean that there isn't some hierarchy of sorts. So I'm arguing that there is a hierarchy, but it's just not one that, it's one that each of us gets to decide and each of us gets to argue over, and there's not really ever an answer. It's not like I can, God is going to come down and say, well, this is productive and this isn't. But, I could clearly argue that, watching porn during the workday is probably unproductive time. I could make that argument. And I feel like I would get, whereas like other people will say like, okay, well, what about reading the Bible or something like that? That might be, some people might call that a waste of time, but other people won't. And that's kind of more of a gray area. But in general, porn watching is probably not productive, I guess, unless you're an artist in that field of some kind. But regardless, I would designate that as unproductive. So whatever the implications of that are, I guess that I'll happy to live with that. Anyway, I'll move on to something else here. Let's see here. I guess I'll since I haven't gotten a good rant out on technology in a while, at least not on this platform. It's about that time. Part of the underlying issue I've run into with technology in general is it isn't necessarily always like, I like to blame obviously the charlatans and the people who proliferate technologies. So the tech leaders and things, I like to blame them a lot, and it isn't technically their fault really, but it is. I mean, it is their fault, but technically you could, like, legally, sure, there's not any really fault to blame. Um, the underlying thesis being that the people ultimately and how they utilize technology are what soil a lot of its ends. And the tech leaders and the charlatans are merely instruments or mediums under which the, the destruction of our inner humanity occurs. They're kind of just the vectors, the magicians uh, that give everyone the spells to ruin themselves. So isn't it like, and they always have very utopian visions. Like Zuckerberg's like, oh, I want to connect everybody with Facebook, as if that is even. And let's suppose even for a second that he actually does believe that, because a huge part of me thinks he doesn't, or maybe he did in the beginning, but now at this point it's just like, well, I'm beholden to all these shareholders or whatever, and I gotta do this, or I gotta whatever, or money, whatever. They make it's bogus thing. So even if he does, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt, believe that Facebook is all about connecting people. Uh, it's still up to the people themselves to utilize that in a healthy, balanced manner, which is not something that they're able to do. And the other problem with, I suppose, progress on the front of technology is that it's increasingly less seen as like uh, I'll say like an improvement or an augmentation on our current things. It's not about like extending the tools of humanity and what we're good at and what we're bad at. It's even more about just covering up our blemishes or helping us when we fuck up, which might sound good in theory, but there's an ad that I saw that I think is particularly poignant about how fucked up this whole thing is. And it comes from none other than the people at Apple. So they have an ad for their new Apple Intelligence. And I saw this just walking by the TV. I obviously don't watch it myself. I should get out of here. Uh, but it's about their new Apple Intelligence on their iPhone. And the ad is like this mother who, based off the context, forgot that it was her husband's birthday. And the daughter comes into frame, who's like a teenage daughter, and gets him like a handmade axe or something. I don't know what the fuck he got. She got her something that, obviously there was some, like you had to think beforehand and set it up and wrap it or whatever. I don't know if it was wrapped, but it was some physical object that you couldn't just manifest out of nothing. And the ad then shows the wife hurriedly asking Apple's AI to make a little, video book, booklet or whatever, a little slideshow of them together and their kids, or him and his hobby or something like that. I forgot exactly what it was. But then like the wife walks away accomplished and happy that like, oh, she got him a gift. This whole thing overshadows the fact that what a piece of shit. You forgot his birthday. Like that's not up to, you don't need the AI shouldn't bail you out because you're an asshole and you did something bad. What you should do is you should say, look, I'm sorry. It's been a tough week of work. I forgot your birthday. Can we go out to dinner? Can we do it? Can we celebrate next week? Can I get you or something like that? Or can you, maybe even if you could do it more in a sly way, you're not really lying. You could say, well, honey, I'm busy tonight. Can we push this to next week? And like the thing is, it's not like she's crazy busy. She was cutting vegetables in the fucking thing. So like if you have time to like cut vegetables, which again, they're like cold vegetables. It wasn't like they're making a stew or something. If you have time to cut cold vegetables, you probably have time to think or add to your stupid fucking calendar that, oh, maybe it's your husband's birthday and to not get him nothing or something. Even if you don't, just then agree to say there's no presents or anything. But it was obvious that she felt sheepish and embarrassed that her daughter gave her dad a present and the shithead wife didn't. And it doesn't matter that it's a wife and not a husband. It could be the same thing. I'd be saying the same thing if it was a wife that forgot, or if it was a husband that forgot his wife's birthday. Piece of shit. And you should fess up to that and be. But it's like this is where technology has come now, where it is now patching up all of our problems and fixing our inefficiencies instead of either one, just like embracing the things that make us human and our shortcomings and our limitations, our finite ability to do things, and not try to make us into these things that we aren't, or two, to like extinguish or hide the fact that we are these flawed, limited people, and then it's just to, instead of to make us more of what we are ourselves, make us more human, it's instead to like try to make us more perfect in the image of other people, or to try to gloss over our imperfections because we make mistakes in things. Which I'm not. It's one thing to chastise the wife in this commercial, because this is a real thing that happens. People do forget their anniversaries and birthdays. It's not the end of the world, obviously. But this is an advertisement. Somebody had the conscious decision to go, okay, we're gonna the main I can think of the best use case for our technology is, let's say a wife forgets her husband's birthday. Like, you had time to think about this, to put a budget together. What's the budget for that ad? How much money was wasted? How many homeless people could we have housed just to show an ad about, hey, if you're a piece of shit person and you forget someone who's important to you's birthday, because you're too busy fucking your boss or whatever, you can make Apple AI create a cruddy spreadsheet or cruddy slideshow that he can watch and cry about. And it's like even worse that he was like, oh, wow, thank you. This is so thoughtful. Assuming that she actually put any time and effort into it. 99% of gift giving in general, this is what I've learned. Rumor has it that I'm pretty good at giving gifts. I'll just say that. The effort and thought that goes into a gift is far more important than whatever the fuck it is. If I spent $20,000 and I just bought it off Amazon, not really that great of a gift. Doesn't matter if it's a helicopter or whatever. If I built a helicopter from scratch, even if it sucked, if I spent months on it and I toiled over it and it was a difficult passion project for me, and that's the gift, way more impactful. And this is obviously, it depends on who you're giving the gift for, but in general, and I think most people would agree with me, the thought and effort that goes into a gift is far more important than whatever monetary value or whatever. And the fact of the matter is, there was no thought gone into this gift. It was an afterthought, literally an afterthought. It was over. The daughter was already giving the husband her gift, and the wife forgot because she's a piece of shit. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but the moral of the story shouldn't be, oh, you fucked up. Technology's here to save you. That's not what it is, and that's also just not. It's just the wrong. It's the wrong message to be sending, and to me, it is. It was just very, very disheartening to see that as literally was the ad that they're airing, and it's like you couldn't have thought of a better use of this Apple Intelligence thing. Really, there's not. I mean, I'm sure there's other ads. I'm sure it wasn't their only ad, but the fact that that was airing on major platforms shows. And then that was the use case. Seriously, it's awful. It's just awful. I don't know. I just was very disappointed in that. So the problem in general with like a lot of technologies isn't that like AI is stupid and you should never use it, but like the person fucked up. It's not the tech. You are the problem. It's not. Don't use technology to bandage up your shortcomings or to pretend that you're not, like, that you're perfect, or in some way that you didn't like make a mistake. Humans should embrace. Humans are not a. We shouldn't be using that to create a veneer of something beyond us. We should use it to extend our capabilities and to make us more ourselves, and not these shadow people that fuck up and use technology to protect us when you're a piece of shit. I don't know. I just hated that ad was awful. Hold on a second. Move on to something else here. But yeah, that really riled me up. I probably had a better little diatribe the first time I saw that ad, but second time's better. Anyway, I guess the other thing that I was thinking about my own blamings, because I do tend to kind of abstract blame a lot, and thinking about blame in narrow versus like broad senses. So it's easy to like, I guess I'm not even sure which one's easier, but it's easier for me to take a singular instance of some kind, even just maybe a single interaction, and then abstract that into a greater societal shift or some larger problem, right? I think that's kind of the direction I tend to go in. Whereas other people tend to look very narrowly at, like, okay, what are these specific instances surrounding this specific use case? So like, even for example, in that stupid Apple ad thing, it's like some people would just say, well, like, you're just looking at one ad, like that's not like descriptive of the entire AI. Like, you're kind of generalizing it too much. Whereas other people might, you know, would argue, like, on my side, where I'm like, I think generalizations in that sense are fair, in this context of, well, it being a commercial, and it quite literally trying to showcase, supposedly what it was what must be a hypothetical, or at least a encourageable use case, right? Like, why would you make an ad for something that isn't a use case that you'd like at least want to see, or that you could do in theory? It's not like it's like a completely fake or like manufactured. I mean, it is manufactured for the sense of the ad, but why would you make that if that wasn't like a use case that you'd expect? And so generalizing that into like the broad sense of like this is not how AI should be used. This is kind of an insult to the uh, I'll say even just like the greater mechanics of human interactions, and doing so is an insult. Whereas I think other people, might say, well, this is only one company, one specific ad, one specific instance. And it might be easier to see like I don't know, to extract like maybe uh, I don't know, like a school shooting or something like that. You could obviously say, well, in this specific instance, this person was mentally troubled. There's a lot of extenuating circumstances you wouldn't expect elsewhere. But I think, and it obviously changes with regard to what we're talking about. With school shootings, it's obvious to see that there's a general trend in a direction. There's a general trend in a direction towards more school shootings. And I think to ignore that and to say everything is like, well, it's all these specific instances. There's just these very isolated instances where problems are happening. It's like, I don't, there is a broader impact here. So while I do sympathize on some level, uh, specific instances don't always imply something broader, right? I feel like it's not always a broader like societal thing. But in a lot of cases, or at least with the cases with technology or with violence or with, I guess, socio-political unrest, I would say that there is broader social impact, like societal uh, blaming or just abstraction that can be made from that, uh, which I don't think is unreasonable. So it's not unreasonable for me to say that there is, perhaps a direction or a slant with technology that is moving in the wrong direction. Just using specific instances, because really enough instances create a path towards a broad blame anyway. And the argument is just about how many instances, how well you can't say they're all unconnected. It's like if every murder, like you have to look at things in the aggregate sometimes. So like it's not sure every murder has their own circumstances that would make it unlikely, but ultimately like there's still a hell of a lot of that going on, you know. Same with, suicides or other problems that happen where it's like not everything is always an extenuating circumstance. Same with like even maybe even broader trends with history, like why were wars started. And you can always look at specific wars and say, well, this specific collection of problems is what led to this specific conflict. And it's like, sure. But in general, it's people fighting over stuff, and the stuff could be other people, it could be ideas, it could be land, it could be pussy. I don't even know. It's like the general idea is the same. So I don't think it's, while I do understand that are times for like narrow focus and narrow blame, I think a lot of the time when I broadly blame society or technology for something, it's not unfounded. And it's because it's generally the same shit that we've seen over and over and over again. And if you continue to specify and say, well, it's just these specific factors that influence this, I think you then just lose the plot on, well, what if you're missing the broader trend anyway? And if you're talking about predicting or stopping things from happening, whatever that may be, you can't really always look at the specific instances. I suppose if you're a lawyer, or a psychologist, and you're tasked with looking at the very minute details of every specific case, then that's fair. But ultimately, for me, as someone who's not either of those, and someone who just likes looking at broad trends, I have no problem blaming things or abstracting things in the broadest sense possible. Kind of turning most things into, what does this mean for society at large, or what does this mean for the whole of technology or people or whatever. Either way, I just thought it was interesting how I don't know. There are two kind of main paths that you could take with narrowing down on specific instances and then making things specific about that instance and not necessarily about something larger versus abstracting it into the largest possible context and say, what does this mean, to the nth degree kind of thinking. Which I guess it's always kind of a spectrum, but regardless, I tend to abstract things into the broader context, just because I think it's varied. This is an opinion piece, totally off the riff, just because I've done a lot of driving. Toll booths are kind of the stupidest thing I've ever thought of, because I mean, if you think about it on one way, it's like you're paying somebody to sit there because the person's sitting there collecting tolls because there's a person in the toll booth most of the time, and part of what your toll does, presumably, I would hope, and I guess I'm not sure how it wouldn't work this way, is you go to pay their hourly rate or their salary, which is there to collect money. So their job is to collect money for they're not doing anything they're not the people that are on the road. They just work in the toll booth. So their job is they don't do anything really besides just collect the money, which is their salary. So you're kind of just paying them. They're almost like a homeless person that they just set up in a little box, and gave them more money than a homeless person. It's like that doesn't make any sense. They're not even the ones like out there. It'd be one thing if you were driving by and you had to like tip the construction worker, whoever's building the road. But it's the other thing. There's like you're just employing a person in a box to sit there and collect money, but they don't do anything. All they do is collect money. It doesn't make any sense. They're not the ones building the road. And I know it's like sure, like there's a surplus beyond that to pay the people to build the roads. But then it's like, well, I thought isn't there already a bunch of money going into like what about the oil that or the gas that you're taxing? Why not tax that more and not have? It's just like I think that what frustrated me the most was just the job itself, like the employment job of somebody sitting in a toll booth is somebody whose sole job is to just collect money for themselves, and I guess a surplus for the people building the road. But the people building the road should either get the money directly or find some other mechanism on which to get more money from the drivers, meaning that you could tax gas more or you could just tax people more like you already do already. It's like it's not like there's going to be any realistic limit on that. People are still getting taxed to hell anyway. But why am I now like driving by, stopping, and paying a person? And I realize there's like specific roads but like I think just the general idea of working at a toll booth is so utterly demeaning to like any semblance of humanity. Because how do you justify that as like a job that is redeemable, right? How do you say like, well, I'm a necessary part of society. I sit in a box and I take people's money and I put it in the cash register and they drive on. It's like the functions of that serve absolutely no purpose other than like the snake eating it's the snake eating its tail. It's the premise of working at a toll booth is both like hilarious and terrifying to me. The fact that like that's somebody's career, or even job. Because even like okay, you work at a fast food, you're preparing food for people, and like sure it's poison, yeah, whatever. Um, or you're working at a grocery store, yeah, you need to clean up spills, or like manage stock, and people need groceries to live. But like a toll booth, you're not doing anything. You don't add anything. You do literally nothing except for collect money, which most people that happens automatically. Just like the paycheck just goes into their bank account all wirelessly, and yet you're getting paid to physically handle somebody's money. It's like this makes no sense to me at all. And I realize that part of this argument would be taken. Well, fine, then just everyone does the whole easy pass or bill by mail things, which is fine, I guess. But then there's also like the probably problem of anonymity with that. But ultimately, there's not any anonymity with it anyway. It's like, do I really expect to be anonymous? There's cameras all around that place. They need to track somebody. They're going to know who stopped and paid, the fat lesbian back there $50 or whatever to go on this toll road. It's not $50 most of the time, but it has been pretty expensive sometimes. If you're going to New Jersey Transit, that place is a fucking ripoff. Um, anyway, the whole premise of working in a toll booth is just hilariously insulting to the people there because you're collecting a salary literally for themselves. Uh, and there's no like there's a surplus, but they themselves don't do anything besides just collect money, which is just strange. Anyway, I probably had a better argument about that when I first thought of it, but that's how these things go. When you write them down and you don't do them for a while, you kind of forget what the main arguments were. But anyway, um, the other thing I was thinking just about, like consumption and people being in their chambers of sorts. And I was curious why this doesn't exist, and it probably does exist. I just don't know of it. But because news now, or whatever you call news or journalism or whatever, it's all kind of fake. Uh, because it's often so skewed towards like, here's this horrible thing that happened. Like, oh, here's this other terrible thing that happened, or here's this like conflict that might happen. Here's this other bad thing that like could be happening. It's like it's just all this like speculative bad shit. Pretty much, there's nothing like that optimistic. So one would be just like a news outlet doesn't even cover anything bad. It's just like, well, we rescued a dog, and it's like, oh yeah. And I realize to be like one thing to like, it kind of seems like you're just catering news to like people with dementia or something. They're incapable of, contextualizing anything bad. So you have to just show them puppies or something, which is, I guess, one kind of cynical way to look at it. Uh, and not entirely wrong either, but that's beside the point. Um, but I was thinking about like in the context of pills, I think it'd be funny to have like a news that gave you a daily blue pill, black pill, and red pill. You know, where it's like kind of the blue pills, obviously like the good news or whatever. Like maybe it's called the white pill or something. I don't know. I don't know the whole pill things that intimately. Um, but yeah, like the daily blue pills like they're your good news, and then your black pills like here's like what's totally fucked, and then your red pills like here's what you can do a little bit better. I realize that that's already probably the case in some, you know, I'm sure some magazines or whatever do that, but I think doing it would be a nice appeal to the Gen Z people who all kind of use that lingo. You know, just as a way to not only consume black pill or red pill stuff, just because that often kind of sends people down little rabbit holes that don't always turn out well for them. We'll say, but anyway, yeah, that was just like a stupid idea I had on the side. I was thinking about like performance and like the ability to exert oneself maximally, and I was thinking this originally because one of the supplements I take that I don't always take it, but I take magnesium. And there's different ones. You know, I think orotate is supposedly the most bioavailable, but there's glycinate oxide and citrate and stuff. Um, but what magnesium does, and this is I'm obviously not a biochemist, so I don't take what I say with a hefty pinch of salt. It like basically helps the muscles relax like a lot. And I was wondering about the greatest of exertions. Do they like what is their correlation between the greatest exertion and like the maximal relaxation? So it's like is there overlap between like the ability to completely relax one's muscles to like a greater extent than others? Um, and does that correlate well with like the ability to exert one's muscles more? So I was wondering if even the peak performances or exertions of things stem from the deepest relaxations. And my theory is that there is a correlation there. Again, the extent of which I don't know, and I won't really speculate on any further. But regardless, I was just thinking of like perhaps part of how you can, if you're wanting to for whatever reason, you know, hit a new PR of some kind. And instead of focusing on purely exerting more, I think perhaps focusing on complete relaxation will allow you to, I don't know, not even manifest is kind of the wrong word, to actually to summon, I guess, a greater exertion, a exertive force, given that you're able to control a little bit of your ability to exert more. Because it's you can kind of view it in the spectrum of control, where like if you have control, if you're trying to get control over like the topmost 1% of exertions, and you are missing like the bottom 40% of relaxations, focusing on the ability to completely relax will allow you full range over like perhaps like exerting at 20% or 40%. Because you tell people to exert like, oh, jump at 20% of your max. It's like nobody knows how to fuck to do that, right? But like 0% is doable, I guess. But like not even really that, like because you're standing up, and that's like technically that's not a jump, but that's still like a normal force going upwards, holding your body up. But like, what about if I said like completely relax? Don't use your legs at all. Like, so obviously you couldn't be seated. I guess you could be seated, but you'd be falling over the chair. You'd have to be laying down and like completely relaxed, which I don't think people do that often. They're often still always kind of uptight doing something or finding some way to be, uh, straining in some way. But I just wonder how beneficial it would be for, and this isn't even just for like peak athletes or anything. This could be for anybody just to, I guess, focus on totally relaxing, even just like the physical body. The mind is one thing. I haven't mastered. I don't know. I don't even know how to like turn off somebody's mind. I don't know how that works. I wish I did, but besides, I guess, drug usage, which I'm not really willing to go into, there's not really a great way of turning off a mind, such that it's not firing, such that it can fire harder later or something like that. I don't know that it really even works like that, but I posit that the body might actually have a mechanism in some way where it does help you exert, or at least have more control over your exertions. Perhaps not even increase the maximal, but more control over your exertions, given that you're able to relax more. So I don't know. I was just thinking about that the other day, but yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, this was interesting to me. So I was wondering if like there's like the whole oh, I forget what it's called already. It's not sapiens, but it's the it'll come to me later and I'll be upset about it. But um what if like if we do create, and this is a huge hypothetical, and I've also already ripped apart this whole idea and concept of super intelligence because I think it's super stupid. Um but suppose it just like goes into a loop where it realizes that the beauty in humanity was just like the journey all along, and it just ends up recreating the humans we have already by starting with like single-celled life and evolution and things like that. What if that is really the whole like the whole circle of life thing? Is it's really, yeah, we're sure we do all this, we have all this progress just for, you know, these supreme supposedly super intelligent beings just to realize that we had it right, you know, or the journey is the whole process. The reason it's right is the journey of it. So there's not really, you know, I don't know. I just thought it'd be funny uh to think of it like that, whereas like all that we're doing, all this is just to like to kind of reinvent ourselves and just go in one big loop. Um, and because it's really also, I mean, if you think about it, the AI that we do have is not really intelligent on its own. It's simply just based off of training data that we have. So because like all it knows really is the story of humanity, uh, then you know, wouldn't it not be that far fetched? They would in turn eventually just invent humanity again. You know, again through maybe more creative ways, but would more or less just go circle back to the beginning. I think it's possible, but I just thought it was a funny thought if that was really the like really what the direction was. But anyway, I'll move on. Maybe I'll go back to that later. But I was thinking also about uh, society, of course, because that tends to be what you know. You know, all my little black pillings that circle around in my head. And it's almost like the greatest sin now in society is almost to be without vice of some kind because there's so much incentive to be viceful in whatever way, whether that to be like a gambling addict, drug addict, porn addict, or social media addict, or whatever it might be. There's like all this reward digitally for addictive behaviors of all kinds. So I think the true like to be hated by society is almost to just to try to live without vice, to try to avoid gambling and all this other crap that is being shoveled down your throats 24/7. And I think that is, and sure, that's a bit hyperbolic probably, but I don't think it's being like totally ridiculous either. I think it truly is like there is not, there's really very little incentive for you to be without vice. And vice too being with just the pursuit of money, even because I think even like healthy food brands of some kind are all often still uh, still vices of like deifying productivity overall, which is not everything. It's not the purpose of your life isn't to be the most possible productive. It's like sure you have to be there's some amount of like reciprocity where you want to be a certain amount of productive, but like making it the only important thing in your life is to be the most productive citizen possible. First, how do you even quantify that? And it's like what if Hitler what if you justified all his productivity with like, oh, well, I need to be productive in making eugenics happen or something like that. Like it could easily backfire. So whatever you think is like this, I guess all important like productivity goal that you might have, you might even just be again building something that should be avoided, or we don't want really. So you should wait and be less productive because it almost is hurting us. Like if you're working for a shit company making crappy super intelligence or something like that, just to put people out of jobs or something. It's probably not. We probably don't want you to be that productive. So it's not like deifying that is also kind of a huge vice that people fall into, and it's hard to call that a vice because it's like, well, it's good. Like I'm healthy, I'm having fun, blah blah. Sure, but like there's also like a certain amount of you know wu wei to the whole thing. Like kind of don't like let things be as they are. Don't fight because part of what like productivity is just kind of fighting being unproductive really. And being unproductive is not you know, is up to you too. But I think people have a skewed version of what being unproductive is. So it's like if I'm not reading a book or doing something like bettering myself for people around me, it's like there's still making things everything arguably productive is, I think, just as viceful as just doing a good job and then going home and gambling away with the money that you made, which is what some people do. Um, not to say I would rather be a productivity viceful guy than a gambling addict or something. But I still don't think it's like you're not totally free from sin if you are just a whore for productivity, really. So, um, I don't know. I think it's I don't know. It's interesting to just think about productivity as a whole and how it's bought and sold, and it's just put forth as this like all perfect idea. Same with like just any kind of notion of equality. Because I've talked about equality things, but so many things are not analogous. You can't really draw a comparison to things that are so maybe are fundamentally different, right? I even talked about like the equality of sexes. Not to say that there isn't some like inherent equality of humans, where like a human soul is worth a human soul, but like to call like you know a basketball team full of 5 foot tall people versus 10 foot tall. It's like there's something unequal about that. And it doesn't mean that the souls themselves are unequal, but for the purpose of this in this context, it is unequal, and it's not preferable to be a team of 5 footers. But either way, there's some just notion about productivity being perfect and like this perfect pursuit of humanity is to be as most productive as possible. But like first off, what the fuck does that mean? It's like, is it really productive if you're doing more work at your investment banking job? No, or like pushing forth mergers and acquisitions of giant tech companies to then create another oligarchic monopoly. It's like, no, it's not even, it's a fucking waste. And it's like, you don't need, I don't know, I think deifying productivity, I think if we want to deify something, how about balance, right? How about, can that be the new vice of the age? Just being the most balanced person possible. So how do you define that? Well, you can't. So good luck trying, I suppose. And I think that's better than like deifying or falling victim to vices of productivity or I don't know, gambling or social media or something. Um, anyway, but yeah. So I'll move on, something like that. I guess same with still on the social media part of things. And I'll have more to say about this later, but I guess I'll just start with this. It is kind of destroying the notion of like a self, in the sense that like you're almost no longer thinking of yourself as objects. And I realize it's as like humans and less as objects. And I realize this is not. It's easy to be like, well, no, I'm obviously my own person. I'm not who I am on social media. But I think more and more now, it's the image, people concerned with the image of themselves, and the image of themselves is not up to them. It's up to social media algorithm and the people that decide what they see and what they like, whatever. And then your sense of worth is instead tied to this object, which is not you. And it's sure it's like loosely based off of your likeness, but it's certainly like in no part you whatsoever. Like, go to anyone's LinkedIn profile and I mean, every single one of them is Warren Buffett. I mean, it's insane. There's not a single shred of honesty on that entire website. And I realize that people like know that and they don't, you know, truly vicariously live their lives out through their online presences. But I think if you take note of how people talk and how people, even like a stranger that they don't know, that they go see, their objectified person on a social media, they're just not, they're viewed as these, digital objects. And they're not seen as human. That's why I think there's a lot of like, and obviously like you can make the argument about like, well, like think about hackers that do horrible things. If they actually saw the victims themselves, they wouldn't have the heart to do it. And that's probably true on some sense. But part of that is because of we've abstracted everyone behind this object of social media. And because you're simply a representation of yourself, you're not even yourself. You are what people think and see you as, which is not true. You are who you are, and that is not something that's easily quantifiable or representative by any digital asset or amount of text or video or anything like that. So it's like even this dumbass channel of mine is not, it surely is like representative in some very loose sense of who I might be or have been at some points. But to call it like me and like me at all, I think is both insulting to me and just like not accurate. I think there's people that maybe they listen to me and they don't never actually met me, and they would meet me and they go, oh, but they're actually not this guy. And I think people know that, but it's hard to ignore that when that seems to be the modus operandi of everybody. Everyone kind of lives everyone, no one really lives through Everyone kind of lives through the object of themselves and not themselves wholly, um, which again is a function and a blame I put on social media. So um, I don't know. I just it's interesting to think about the whole objectification of the self and the whole like commodification of those objects, where it's no longer I don't know. It's become about the objects and not about the people. Whereas it used to be, I think maybe it didn't used to be. I don't know. It's problematic in general to objectify things in any sense. At least not in a way that is healthy or at least is under limited control. The related idea in that, which isn't mine, I pulled it from somebody I read on my RSS feed. It's like Ted Gio. He's a jazz guy, but he was talking about I forgot his name, but he was some visionary. I don't know. Maybe you can look him up. But he's talking like there's two different like types of systems. Ones that like perpetuate themselves, and not even really that. Systems that are feedback loops that are sustainable, like sustainable feedback loops. Like like you look at like individual autonomous systems or individual systems like a train engine or even just like a personal computer itself. It's like a system, a feedback loop system, but it's like a closed system. So it feeds itself. It kind of knows itself and it exists for like itself's sake in it like a little bubble of influence. It's not like, you know, it can go rogue or something like that. I guess it could in theory, but that also would be because of an outside influence. But he was talking about the other kind of system, which I think he pointed towards algorithmic online engagement. And it's systems that don't really have any checks and balances internally. Like whereas a computer kind of is limited by its own hardware and its own software and things that are internal to the computer. An algorithm that generates, likes for more likes doesn't ignores a lot of the stuff that's outside of the system. So like where like because people are outside those systems, like people are behind those likes and dislikes and those shares and unshares or whatever, and uh, and making a system purely for like okay we want to maximize the amount of engagement online or the amount of likes that I get is not representative of the people, like the people actually liking things. It's a like it's a connected variable, but it's not the variable itself. It's like there's a better word for that, but I'm not getting the word. It's not coming to me, but it's a proxy variable kind of. I think that's what I was looking for. It's a proxy variable, meaning it's like sure the number of likes on something serves as a proxy, but does it mean that because there's 2 million likes now and there's 4 million likes tomorrow that people are twice as happy tomorrow as today? It's like obviously not. But I think if you look at algorithms through that way, you can be like, oh well, that's kind of the way that the computer assumes that it is, even though that's not the case at all. Which is obviously troublesome. Um, but I don't know. Maybe I should reread that article. So otherwise, I feel like I don't know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, but anyway, um, yeah, I guess. Yeah, speaking of, I guess my woes with productivity, or not even that in general, just my woes with getting stuff done that I want. I guess you can call that productivity, but just doing things. I've missed this like flow state which people had, and not that I am like this absolutist where it's like all about flow state. I got to get into flow. Like, don't bother me, honey, I'm in flow. It's like I don't. That sounds that sounds wrong. Either way, I feel like I certainly haven't been in any kind of flow state for uh a while now, and I do kind of miss that because there was points in time where I could, I at least had work that was important enough to where I could fall in like schoolwork and stuff that you can kind of fall into flow and then forget about the passage of time a little bit. But I felt so anchored to the passage of time, maybe both through my like stupid antics with the timers or whatever. But I just haven't been able to fall into this state of flow, which has been, um, I'll say, frustrating in the least, because it is a very nice state to be in, just to kind of forget and let time just kind of goes by. You don't really thinking about anything. You're just kind of working on what you want to work on, and then letting things happen. I've gotten a little bit maybe the last couple of days just with troubleshooting my OS and things, but I have been missing flow state, and I wish there was a better way for myself to induce that in myself. Not that I'm trying to weaponize my own abilities, but I do think it is nice to have the flow state. And some of that comes from like this, what I call like this perfect amount of brain fog, where it's not like I think if you're too clear headed, you're too aware of everything that's going on. Whereas I think if you want to be in flow, you have to have like this, again, this perfect amount of brain fog where you're not really aware of the time that's going by, or like you're not aware of like what you have later that day, or what you're going to eat for lunch, or what you already ate, or if your stomach is bothering you. You're simply like, that's all fogged away. And you're instead just focused on like what is the task at hand. And I think that is kind of what's required to really enter a true flow state, is to have this ideal level of brain fog, which I guess I have not had for a while. So um, I guess sort of doing that. I'm not really sure how to induce that or to create that, but I guess one way would be tired or something like that. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just too alert. I'm sleeping too much and I'm too healthy. Maybe I need to get sick so that I can have the brain fog. But I don't know. I am still kind of sick, if you can't tell, and that has not helped actually. So I suppose I can dispel that myth. Anyway, I'll wrap it up there for this time, but hopefully get back on the horse and be posting more regularly. I have a Let's Play video that I've it's been overdue for about 12 months at this point. But it's almost, I have all the material, I just have to edit it together, and I've been missing the flow state because I haven't done it. But maybe I'll post that in the next couple of days, so just be on the lookout. And now that I said it, I have to do it. Otherwise, I'm a liar. So, all right. Anyway, peace out.